Now, as I explained at the start of the show, it's very important that we have fun on the radio station. Of course it is, but we also need to tackle those difficult topics. And when there's things happening around the world, it's our job as broadcasters to tell you about them. But sometimes, I'll be honest with you, I get out of my depth as a broadcaster. And I don't mind doing the funny stuff, I don't mind doing all that, but when we need to tackle those serious issues, I'm out of my depth on it. But one man who isn't, and one man who does this sort of thing very, very well, is the Right Honourable Alistair. Now, good morning, Alistair. Alistair Burt, thank you very much for joining us here on the station.
You're very welcome. Thank you for asking. I know your listeners are interested and care about this, and accordingly, how can I help you?
It's a real difficult thing, isn't it, this? Because we thought that this was all sorted when we heard that our soldiers, they were over there 10 years ago, and we saw the photographs, we saw the videos of what we hoped would be peace happening in Afghanistan. So then in the last month or so, to hear that there's unrest there again, what's going on, Alistair? Why is this happening?
Right, well, in brief, just to describe what happened. Afghanistan is a complex country. Never, particularly in history, ruled effectively by one group or another, a lot of conflict in the country. But over 20 years ago, a particular group called the Taliban, who have a very strict interpretation of Sharia law and a determination to impose that upon others, took control of Afghanistan, as well as being very cruel to minorities and people whose views they disagreed with inside Afghanistan. They allowed Afghanistan to be used by those who would wish to attack the West, notably Al-Qaeda, who planned and plotted with Osama bin Laden the attack on the Twin Towers in New York in 2001. As a result of that, in which 2,500 people were killed, the United States and its allies said that Afghanistan could no longer harbor this group, and accordingly troops were sent to remove the threat to us and others from Al-Qaeda. That was done, and our troops assisted in that, and NATO troops assisted in that. But after that, the issue became what was happening in Afghanistan. It was considered unwise to leave Afghanistan as it was, with the risk of the Taliban coming back. And so efforts were made over 20 years to help Afghanistan rebuild, to support a system of government which they wanted. And in that time, in that 20 years, Afghanistan has been able to change. Women who were very much subjugated under Taliban rule were able to be educated. People were able to have lives not dissimilar to those that we would wish. But there was always an undercurrent of those who resisted and reject the ways that we consider to be normal. They simply melted into the background, but they kept up their attacks on what they believed was an oppressive external force. And recently, the United States took the view that it could not keep its troops there forever, decided to remove its troops. And without that support, it turns out that the Afghan government was not strongly supported enough by its people, and the Taliban and its powers have been able to come back and effectively now control the country. And the world is left wondering what sort of rule now the Taliban will impose upon a people who quite plainly do not all want it. And that's the background to the scenes that we are witnessing now.
And on social media, it's not often a nice place, because you see people who they would never dare to say that in person, but they sort of hide behind the screen. And a few comments that I've seen, it's been people saying, well, it's the country's own fault because they've had 10 or so years to get ready for their own ruling, to sort of make things a lot more sustainable. They can't just rely on the help of other countries. What do you think about that, Alistair?
I think there's no doubt that there were failures in the Afghan government system. Corruption is an issue in the region. Corruption is an issue worldwide, and it's not illegitimate to point fingers at that. But having said that, the country was also working extremely hard to make change in very difficult circumstances. As you heard in the House of Commons the other day, the soldiers who worked with soldiers in Afghanistan believed they were very brave. They were equipping them. They were taking on challenges they'd never previously before taken on. But the support of those from outside was crucial to that. Now, the United States has retained troops in Europe for many years. It's retained troops in Korea for many years to help support peace structures there after the Second World War and after the Korean War. The decision to leave Afghanistan was obviously a difficult one for the United States, but I think it's a combination of factors. I think leaving Afghanistan to it carries two risks. Firstly, there are those within the Taliban and those who think as they do, who do not stop at their own borders. They fundamentally challenge a way of life that we consider to be normal. They do not believe that women have a place in society. They do not believe that a number of the freedoms that we have are moral or legitimate. And they will send messages, as they have done, to those outside their own borders throughout Europe and other places to say that the system is weak and should be challenged. And Afghanistan, to be left to it, carries that risk. The second is we must be prepared to see extreme examples of cruelty inflicted on innocent people and be prepared to stand by and do nothing about it, which will hurt. And I'm not sure we all have the answers to this. Certainly, there are many people who quite understandably feel this is nothing to do with us and it should be happening elsewhere. But that carries great risks. And for the advancement of peace and stability, things that we have believed in for a number of centuries, giving people the choice about their own lives. If people are oppressed, there will be instability because they will fight back. And if there is an area of instability, it can be exploited by others who are harmful and damaging to this country, to our beliefs, and to the things that we hold to be dear. And we could be threatened. That is the unstable situation we have today.
Now, like many, I watched the press conference that took place this week, which was, I suppose, the media's first opportunity to ask questions. And as a person watching it, I came away thinking, well, actually, they don't seem as bad as what the media have been saying. Now, I've worked in this game a long time and I know how it works. But I came away thinking, well, they've said, and I've got here a few quotes, they've said that they want peace, they don't want bloodshed. And the key thing here was that everybody is welcome as long as they live and agree to the law. And that's when the problems start, isn't it? Because you can't say that everybody's free and we can live in peace just as long as you abide by what we say. So in the press conference, Alistair, were we being fooled? Were we seeing the real Taliban and what they plan to do?
The short answer is nobody knows. And anyone who gives you a definitive answer is guessing to a degree. The people that I have been in contact with through others and the news reports that you see make it clear that there are many people in Afghanistan who just don't believe it. And the fact that women are prepared to throw their babies over barbed wire in order to prevent them living in a country ruled by the Taliban would give an indication of the degree of fear which they are currently living with. We don't know. All we do know is a large number of people have sought to leave because they are frightened. There are people now effectively who have gone underground, women who've been in prominent positions, those who have criticized the Taliban because they are afraid. There are documented examples of atrocities that have already taken place where people who have surrendered to the Taliban have been killed and people have been murdered in cold blood, pulled out of their houses and the like. There does seem to be an issue between what the Taliban have said publicly what the leadership may be professing, and what is happening in individual places. The rule of command does not extend easily, and local commanders may be taking their own decisions, and powerful young men with guns are in a position to extract revenge and to rule as they wish. All I would say is we have all heard what the Taliban leadership have said publicly. None of us know. We will be able to find out over time. But at present, the evidence from Afghans themselves is one of extreme worry and concern about what is happening. And I suppose, bearing in mind the evidence we've had in the past and what we already know, we would be unwise to take this at face value until there has been some experience of how the Taliban expect to rule. But your fundamental point, that people will be safe as long as they obey what they are told to do, gives a suggestion of a controlled society, which is not the way we live, and is clearly not the way many people in Afghanistan want to live themselves. What choice are they allowed about their future?
And I suppose the big question is, as mere civilians ourselves, what can we do about this, Alistair, from both a political point of view and a Christian point of view? How can we help? What can we do?
The hard thing, I think, is for people to be told there's very little they can do. Nobody wants to be in that position. But that is, being, brutally honest, that is effectively where we are. We, as a country and as a partnership with other free nations, have lost what leverage we had in Afghanistan. We are reduced to asking the Taliban for favors to get people out and to telling them they must rule decently, and the or carries nothing with it, except perhaps a withdrawal of funds. The Taliban will make up any funds that they lose because they sell drugs. The world's heroin and crack cocaine crack meth is driven from Afghanistan, and it's driven by the Taliban. So these people seek to destroy our society in other ways as well. What we can do at the moment is be aware of what's happening. There are charities and NGOs who will continue to work in Afghanistan, incredibly brave people who will work with people who are seeking a different life. And I think we will continue to do that. But we are going to have to reflect on what this means for the world in which we live. Many of us have lived in what we consider to be a world which progresses steadily, in which the sort of things that we have taken for granted, maybe for 1,000 years, that we have some say in our lives, that we have some say in the laws that govern us, that we are not governed by a theocracy, where people make the laws because of what they believe through a holy book in which they believe, but others don't. But we have a choice. We are going to see people denied that, and they will have to live the way they are told to live. If we are comfortable with that, then so be it. But this will not make for an easy world. And I don't believe those who are propagating this want to stop at their own borders. It isn't what they believe. They believe the world should obey in the way that they want to make people obey in Afghanistan. And these people exist in other parts of the world as well. So I think we have to take a good look at what it is we believe, what we want our countries collectively to do in relation to this threat. And we have to work out in the first place an accommodation with people to try and mitigate any of the worst effects of what might happen. And I suppose, in all honesty, also wait and see. In terms of a Christian response, these are people who do not tolerate other faiths, believe it is an affront for people to hold another faith in which they don't believe, and which they physically try and chase. There will be Christian believers and believers of other faiths in Afghanistan. Pray for them. They will have a difficult time. But the big issue is to what extent this will change matters both in the region and more widely. And at this point, we just don't know.
Alistair, thank you so much, because it's difficult when you hear different views coming through from the newspapers and radio and TV. It's difficult to know what to believe. So thank you for helping us and giving us an insight into this terrible situation that's happening at the moment.
Let me try and help a little bit more. In terms of belief, I know there is a mood out there. You can't trust the mainstream media and things like that. I know the people who are out there reporting personally. I know the people who are on the ground who are trying to give you information. You can trust them. You can believe them. We are very fortunate. We have brave reporters from the BBC, from Sky, from independent news, from newspapers, credible people who see things and report them back. Do not be led down the path of you can't believe any of these people. They are telling us a story. They're not. They're telling you what they see. I've been to Afghanistan. I've worked with some of the people who now feel abandoned by us, who try to make their country a better place. I've worked with some of the women in civil society who are now very afraid of their future. I can tell you their fears are true. So do be guided. The people who write and report for us in our country, a free country, where people are able to say what it is they want, and if they say things that are untrue, they can be called out. It's believable, and they will give you a fair account of what is happening now. We don't know what will happen in the future. We don't know whether the Taliban are any different. The evidence at the moment is those closest to them do not believe it, and those closest to them in the world of South Asia don't believe it either. But we must wait and see. But please don't have people thinking that you can't trust anything out there. That is part of the tactic of undermining our society, to get people to think that nothing is believable when the government says it, or when our media say it, and it's a dangerous strand of thought. There are people to believe it isn't all untrue, and I would urge people to read reputable mainstream media, because they will get the truth from our reporters.
The Right Honourable Alistair Burt there telling us about Afghanistan. And we love having him on because he's a man of great experience. And you heard it there that he's actually been to Afghanistan. And he knows a lot of the reporters. He's worked in politics. So a reliable source there. Alistair, always a pleasure. And thank you very much. And remember, as Christians, we need to be praying into this situation.